Thank you very much, Laura, and good morning, everyone, both here in the room and out on the web. Again, good morning. My name is Josh Murphy. I'm with NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. I want to thank the Commerce Research Library for hosting me this morning and allowing me to speak to you on a very exciting initiative that we're very proud of coming from NOAA's Office for Coastal Management. We call it Digital Coast. And this morning I'm going to talk about how we provide actionable information to coastal communities that we work with. And I'll talk about how we do that and what constitutes actionable information very shortly. But first, I want to take a moment, really set the stage and talk about our coastal areas, our coastal regions, starting with the populations. If we look just at those counties along the coast, our coastal shoreline counties, including those along the Great Lakes, we see here that it's less than 10% of our nation's land area, yet there's a sizable amount of our population here, about 39%. This is as of 2010. These areas are very populated. They're very dense in their population. They're growing very rapidly. These are also areas that are very ecologically rich. It's the intersection point between terrestrial and marine ecosystems. And so there's a lot going on in our nation's coastal zone that our coastal managers have to think about balancing these tremendous population pressures in the natural environment. If you don't live along the coast, if you're not part of that 39% of our nation's population that lives along the coast, chances are you recreate there. Our coasts play an enormous role. They're a huge economic engine, if you will, for the nation. There's a lot of different economic sectors that the coasts rely on: tourism, recreation. We also have our nation's port communities and port cities along the coast. Chances are, if you're a business that wants to bring your products and services to market in a global economy, you rely on those port communities and the networks that comprise the marine transportation system to bring that to market. So we see here a very sizable chunk of the nation's GDP also comes through our coastal areas. But these are also areas that aren't just environmentally, ecologically rich and a large driver of our economy. These are also areas at great risk. We know this very much. These numbers come before Sandy hit the mid-Atlantic region, but you see here 9 of the top 10 most destructive flood events on record have occurred since 1999. And with more extreme events on horizon, we definitely expect these numbers to change. So that's kind of the coastal story, if you will, why our coasts matter. And I'd like to speak for just a second about NOAA's Office for Coastal Management that I'm representing today. Some of you may know us as the Coastal Services Center and the Office for Ocean and Coastal Resource Management. We're a fairly new office within NOAA's National Ocean Service. We really strive to bring science, information, and policy solutions to bear, if you will, to really enable our coastal communities to really to explore various avenues for really addressing some of the various coastal issues that I spoke about before. You see here we have a very large presence both in Charleston, South Carolina and Silver Spring, Maryland, but we also have a defined regional presence that really allows us to be really in touch with the communities that we serve along the coastal zone. Starting in 2007, we recognized that we had a really big opportunity. Our office had been around since about the mid-90s from the Coastal Services Center perspective. We have really been working very well, very closely with a lot of the organizations that were stewards of the coastal zone. At the same time, we really had a great opportunity from our staff within the office to really showcase how we could utilize mapping and geospatial technologies to really give coastal communities that edge in really exploring and addressing their coastal issues. And so, again, around 2007, we really took the opportunity to really bring together the coastal resource management communities we were working with, as well as the technical communities, and really start this effort that we now refer to as the Digital Coast, such that it was really, we like to think of it as more than just data, and that's what you see here on the front page of our website. We actually think it's more than just a website. We like to think of it as a constituent-driven, integrated, enabling platform supporting coastal resource management that is used. There's a lot there, and it's very important. I'll highlight to be constituent-driven. It means that we need to be actively listening to the folks that we serve. And to be an enabling platform means we need to think more than just putting information out the door. We need to think about comprehensive information solutions. And so I'll show you how we do that in the remainder of the presentation. It's interesting to note that when we started the Digital Coast in 2007, we didn't start with a website. Rather, what we did was we started with the formation of the Digital Coast Partnership. You see the 8 national level organizations that are members of the Digital Coast Partnership on this slide, as well as the NOAA Office for Coastal Management. We started out with 5 organizations. We've since grown to 8. Some of them you may recognize: the American Planning Association, the Nature Conservancy, perhaps the Urban Land Institute. Some you may not: the National Estuarine Research Reserve Association, the Association of State Floodplain Managers, the National States Geographic Information Council. All of these organizations are national in their scope. They represent either coastal managers that are working at various scales: national, regional, state, and local with the National Association of Counties, or they represent practitioners that are working in coastal issue areas, like the Association of State Floodplain Managers, bringing the floodplain management community to the party, as well as the Nature Conservancy and their approach of really kind of emphasizing conservation and ecosystem services. So all of these organizations, they work with the Office for Coastal Management, and we really affect a two-way street, right? They help us promote what we're doing with the Digital Coast, but they also really help us get to know their constituencies, help us get to know our audience a little bit better, because it's extremely important to recognize, and this is what we've learned through the Digital Coast Partnership, is that communities are different. They're all different shapes and sizes, and they have different capacities to be able to use and apply information. And that's important, because it's really driven how the approach that we take in the Digital Coast, right? A very broad spectrum, a broad brush approach to providing information-based solutions. It means we can't just put a single data set or tool out the door. We have to think about the fact that certain communities are very resource limited. They don't have the resources, both financially and personnel-wise, to be able to use very technical geospatial data and information. But we do have lots of users, lots of larger communities, folks from the private sector that do have the technical capacity to be able to use data and information. So we have to think about an approach that's very flexible. It allows multiple entry points, and you see this here on our slide. We facilitate anyone coming into the Digital Coast platform the ability to learn a little bit more about a particular issue. If they are technically inclined, they can actually go and download the data that we use to address a specific issue. We have numerous tools that I'll talk about in just a second to help folks visualize data and extract information. We have tools that also facilitate analyzation and analytics, as well as we have training and technical assistance platforms that really help folks learn a little bit more about how information can be applied. And finally, we allow the opportunity for folks to share information about how they're using and applying Digital Coast resources as a part of the platform. So as you can see, this is an approach that we really espouse throughout the Digital Coast platform. It's something that we know works through our through how we work with the Digital Coast Partnership, the feedback that we get through them. But now I'd like to talk a little bit more about some of the major components, some of these different information resources that we provide through the Digital Coast website and how it all comes together. We'll start with data. You see on the front page of the website, again, that we like to say that it's more than just data, but data really is foundational to everything we do in the Digital Coast. We have over 70 terabytes of data. That's, for those of you who aren't aware of what a terabyte is, that's, I'll boil it down. It's a lot of data, especially as it relates to high-resolution elevation data derived from LIDAR, land cover data through our Coastal Change Analysis program, as well as orthoimagery. We provide access to these repositories of data through a custom-developed data access viewer program that allows someone to come in, enter an area of interest, and get the data they need for their particular application. We also provide over 200 different web mapping services. If you're familiar in the geospatial world these days, web mapping services are all the rage. They allow you to basically connect to a centralized server and get the information and mash it up with other different data sets to make your own maps and do your own data analytics. And then finally, we provide linkages to over 40 different national level coastal data sets coming from NOAA and from our partners in other federal agencies, as well as state and local entities as well. We also provide over 50 different tools in the Digital Coast, and this is an area that has really grown as of late, especially with regard to the number of tools that we provide that are web-based. It used to be that all the tools that we provided necessitated desktop GIS software, which is very technical in its implementation and very resource intensive. However, now, with the advent of web-based mapping applications, we really provide visualization and analysis capabilities to anyone who has a web browser and an internet connection. So we're really expanding the reach of our different products and services, and these tools are very simple, they're very easy to understand, and they provide a lot of value in terms of providing information as opposed to data. And I'm going to talk about two tools in particular here as a part of the presentation this morning. The first one is our Sea Level Rise and Coastal Flooding Impacts Viewer. This is the result of over 3 years of work in which we worked with our partners and federal, state, and local entities to really compile the best available elevation data derived from LiDAR to get a very accurate elevation surface, and then use that information to drive inundation surfaces that we put out through our mapping viewer. And so here's what the viewer looks like. You can get to it through the Digital Coast website. It allows you to look at, with very few exceptions, many different communities along the coastal zone. We now have the entire East, Gulf, and Pacific coasts mapped, many of the U.S. states and territories in the Pacific and the Caribbean. The sole exception here is Alaska, where we have numerous data gaps that are a little bit challenging for us to overcome at the moment. But basically, the way that this works is that you come into the viewer. On the left-hand side, you see there in red is a simple slider bar. And this slider bar allows someone to basically change the inundation level from the mean high water tidal datum all the way up to 6 feet above that. In certain communities, we've worked with our local folks on the ground to provide pictures of local landmarks. You see here, there's a small camera icon in the center of the screen. If you click on that, what happens is you get a picture. And we use another software that's available through the Digital Coast called CanViz. That's a very simple, easy-to-use visualization software to provide additional context. There are some folks that don't relate too well to maps, and the purpose of this tool is to affect risk communication. What we really want to try to do is ensure that we can hit as many people as possible. So we derived these visualizations that allow someone to kind of see what this inundation would look like. And so we're at 1 foot of sea level rise. This is the Charleston, South Carolina area, for those of you who are familiar with the map. And as we can go all the way up again, this is 4 feet, 5 feet, 6 feet. You notice the change not only in the map, the inundation, and you see there's a fair amount of inundation here in Charleston, but also you see what that does to the visualization here, the U.S. Customs House, which if you've been into Charleston, that's at the foot of the city market. So a lot of information here just within the Sea Level Rise tab, but we provide much more information through the viewer itself. Something that we provide here that we're very proud of is the fact that when you do an inundation map, you inevitably have to draw a line between those areas that are wet and those areas that are dry. However, you're really dependent on the accuracy of the data and the methods that are employed to really determine where that line is, and sometimes that line can change. And so what we've done in the Sea Level Rise and Coastal Flooding Impact Sphere is we've looked at how we could kind of demonstrate that single line in the sand may be more of a fuzzy area, and we do that through confidence maps. These areas in blue are where we have greater than 80% confidence that these areas are going to be inundated at this level. Those areas in orange are where we are less than 80% confident. So they may or may not be wet, and we see how this changes as we raise the sea level. So it's a great innovation with regard to technical mapping. It's a way, again, to really start to communicate that those folks that are right along the edge there between those areas that may be wet and may be dry, there is a gray area where you may be at an area of risk that may not be as enhanced as if you were in the inundation zone, but is an area of risk nonetheless. We've also worked with the Nature Conservancy to take a look at how the natural environment may be impacted through looking at and integrating a marsh migration model. We see here, this is land cover coming to us from our Coastal Change Analysis Program. Those areas in purple are estuarine areas. This is the one part of the tool in which we actually bring in a couple of different options for the user to take a look at time horizons as well as accretion rates. And here with a time horizon of 100 years and a low accretion rate, you start to see those areas on the lower left-hand side of the map that were purple are now blue, which means that they are inundated. So this is a way to kind of take a look at how the natural environment may really respond to changes in sea levels. We also integrate data coming to us from a partnership with the University of South Carolina on their Hazards and Vulnerability Research Institute. This is the Social Economic Vulnerability Data Set, or SOVI. It's mapped to the census tract level. Those areas that are in red have a higher socioeconomic vulnerability than those that are in lighter colors. And this is an index that was developed, again, by our colleagues at the University of South Carolina. It takes in consideration about 50 different indicators of social and economic vulnerability. So again, allows another dimension of data. We can then use this to visually overlay this information with the inundation maps. Finally, this is probably my favorite part of the tool. It's what we call the flood frequency tab. Really, what these areas are showing here, these are areas in red that right now they flood whenever the National Weather Service issues a shallow coastal flooding advisory in the Charleston area. And many of the weather forecast offices along the coast, they do issue these shallow coastal flooding advisories at various heights. Basically, it's once the water level gets above a height to where they feel that there is particular danger to property and potentially life, threatening areas and issues as well. What we've done here is, you see here in the middle of the image, there's a tide gauge right there in about the center of the Charleston Peninsula. We've worked with our colleagues at NOAA's Center for Operational Oceanographic Products and Services, or co-ops, to take a look at trends in tide gauge data over time and extrapolate that further into the future. If we add half a meter of sea level rise or a meter of sea level rise, what you see on the graph there on the lower right-hand side is where currently these areas in red, which includes a lot of estuarine areas, but you see in the middle of Charleston, there's also some urban areas that are involved here. They flood maybe a handful of times a year, usually in the spring and the fall with the astronomical high tides. However, with only small changes in sea levels, a half a meter, if you will, these areas will start to flood over 300 times, basically every day. And with 1 meter sea level rise, we'd expect these areas to flood almost twice a day. And so we like to say that today's flood is tomorrow's high tide. This is kind of the canary in the coal mine, if you will. These areas are areas that we're already starting to see flood, and we're really going to expect to see them to flood more frequently in the future. So that's the sea level rise and coastal flooding impacts viewer. I'd also like to talk about the Coastal County Snapshots product that we developed. This is one of my favorite products that we have that I think really demonstrates the power of the Digital Coast Partnership. This is a product that was developed with close consultation with our partner at the National Association of Counties. They wanted a product to really effectively articulate flood risk in their coastal constituencies, their coastal counties. However, they told us that their membership, the county commissioners, the folks that they serve, they didn't really like these fancy technical mapping viewers that we were putting out the door. They wanted something that was tangible, that they could actually hand out in a meeting with the general public or with the folks that they serve, and that was also extremely easy to understand. And so what that resulted in is development of these snapshot products that you see there. I'll demonstrate how you get to this in just a second, but basically we've since expanded the County Snapshots product. We started with a flood inundation snapshot, looking at inundation risk in our coastal counties. We now have one on the ocean and Great Lakes economy, as well as looking at the benefits that wetlands provide through ecosystem services to our coastal areas. Very simple and easy to use. As you come through the Digital Coast, you basically select a state, and then a county of interest. Again, we're going back to Charleston, South Carolina. It is my hometown. And then from there, you can choose one of the 3 snapshot products. We'll start with the flood exposure snapshot. Again, this is what we have. It's, again, very easy to understand information communicated through charts and graphs. At the top, we look at populations that are both inside and outside of the FEMA flood zone, looking at the data coming from the National Flood Insurance Program. You see here in Charleston, at the left-hand side of that is a graph looking at total population. About 47% of the population in Charleston County right now, it resides in the flood zone. And then we look at populations in vulnerable populations, So that's the elderly, population over 65, population in poverty. I'll note this is data coming from the American Community Survey. from our colleagues at the U.S. Census Bureau. Then we move on down. We see information on critical facilities in the FEMA flood zone. We see here schools, police stations, fire stations, medical facilities. And again, we look at those both inside and outside the flood zone. And then finally at the bottom, again, recognizing that when you've got a lot of development in the flood zone, that definitely puts you at higher risk. We see a couple different charts that also illustrate how much land has been converted from natural areas to development in the flood zone. So this is the front of our snapshot. Each snapshot has two sides. The back here you see is a simple map that shows the floodplain in Charleston County. And then, again, I'm going to go back to that approach that we espouse for the Digital Coast. We don't just want to put one single product out the door. We want to facilitate linkages to, how someone could use and apply that product. And so you'll see here in the middle that we have links to next steps. If someone wants to know more, if they want to go into finer detail about how they can articulate the risks, we provide linkages to other tools, data, and information through the Digital Coast. And then we also provide linkages, again, at the bottom to the data sources as well. Again, being as transparent as we can so that someone else can do their own, integrate their own data and do their own, use their own methods here as well. So that's the flood exposure snapshot. You can print it out very easily to a PDF, or you can print it out on paper. Again, it's two-sided. But again, since we introduced the flood exposure snapshot, we really heard, we got great feedback from the Digital Coast partners. It's very well received. And so we expanded this out to include information on ocean jobs. And I'll talk all about our efforts in the coastal and ocean economy in just a second. But this is a snapshot that highlights coastal jobs, wages, and GDP related to different coastal sectors, coastal and ocean sectors, again, that I'll articulate in just a second. So a way to really kind of take a look at the contribution that our coastal and ocean areas really play to the economies in these regions. Again, front and back, you see in the back we have links to digging deeper. And then finally, we have the most recent snapshot that we put out the door relates to wetland benefits, really helping to try to broach the topic of ecosystem services. Those benefits that natural areas provide, in this case looking at the benefits they provide to different jobs, rec and tourism, as well as fisheries, and really start to broach the topic of why we should be thinking about these very important wetland ecosystems in our coastal areas. So that's just a couple of the over 50 different tools that are available on the Digital Coast website. We also provide a wealth of training resources, over 22 different courses, and this number expands very quickly. We're actually in the process of revamping this part of the Digital Coast website to include more and more self-guided training resources. So definitely take a look now and then come back in a few months to really see the wealth of information and training resources we have. This also includes instructor-led trainings that can be brought to a particular community. It also includes kind of web-based training that is all the rage these days that allows you to come in and do training on your own. So about 20 different training courses and a variety of different coastal topics. Finally, one of the last sections I'll hit on here, kind of the core sections, if you will, is what we call stories from the field. And this really is where we see a lot of value in the Digital Coast. This is basically a collection of 100 different stories, very short place-based narratives, in which what we've done is we've worked with our partners and users who have accessed and used Digital Coast resources to address a specific issue. These are very short, they're very easy to understand, but really they highlight where folks are actually taking action with this information. And this is really meant not only to help us tell the Digital Coast story, if you will, but to also allow communities to learn from each other. That's a really big part. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten is that communities love to hear from agencies like NOAA and others, but they also like to learn for each other. And so the stories from the field section really helps to affect that knowledge transfer. So it's a lot of information, to be sure. And I'm sure it could be very easy for folks to become overwhelmed with the Digital Coast website. And so what we've done is the newest section of the website that we've just brought online is what we call topics, in which what we've really tried to, within some very partner-driven and identified issue areas, bring together all of the various Digital Coast resources, data, tools, training, case studies, publications, and the like, such that they really help to come together to be that kind of central repository for various coastal issues. So you see we have 5 topics right now: coastal land cover, coastal and ocean economy, water quality, green infrastructure, climate adaptation. I know that we're getting ready to bring at least 2 more online in the coming months. But one that I do want to highlight very briefly here is the coastal and ocean economy. This is an area where we've really made some large investments over the last 3 to 5 years, and that's also involved really building great partnerships with folks, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and others to really do a deep dive into the coastal and ocean economy. I kind of set the stage at the beginning talking about really the importance of our coast and the coastal economy. Well, here's really where we start to bring this information to bear through the Digital Coast website. And it's through a program we call Economics National Ocean Watch, or ENOW. You can see here on the right-hand side, this is one of the products that we provide through the ENOW kind of suite of products and services called the ENOW Explorer. It allows someone to come in and basically take a look at 6 different economic sectors that are really coastal and ocean dependent. Things like living resources, marine transportation, tourism, and recreation. And then what we do is we work through, again, our partnerships with BEA, BLS, and others to really compile and synthesize information in 4 different economic indicators: establishments, GDP, wages, and employment in all these different areas. And again, so we provide these products, again, in that Digital Coast approach, multiple products, like the ENOW Explorer, the Coastal and Ocean Jobs Snapshot I spoke about before, as well as training, and other different publications through the Economics National Ocean Watch. This is one of the areas that is really burgeoning within the Digital Coast and has really been very fruitful in how we've really built some great, fantastic working relationships with other colleagues within Commerce, as well as other different federal agencies. And we've heard from our coastal colleagues and our partners and constituents that this is very useful and critical information. I'll close out the presentation this morning by really you're talking about how we really assess performance, right? And we all know with our federal efforts, we really try to do a good job of assessing how we're doing and promoting our performance. And within the Digital Coast, the way that we've done this is we've developed a publication that you can get on our website called Projected Benefits and Costs of the Digital Coast. This is a result of a study that was recently updated for 2015. Basically, what this does is it allows you to take a look at our benefits and costs of the Digital Coast. And we see here, basically, currently, starting in the year 2013, fiscal year 2013, that we see that the Digital Coast, through our studies, have provided a return on investment of about 3 to 1, which is obviously very, very good. If we project that out through 15 years to FY28, we see that increases up to 4 to 1. We worked with our partners to do this study. You see on the lower right-hand side there, our partner NSGIC, the National States Geographic Information Councils, did a survey of their constituents as well as the constituencies of the various Digital Coast partners to really ask them, what's the importance, what's the role that the Digital Coast played in their everyday jobs. And you see overwhelmingly the 57% said that they would conduct lower quality work without the resources or with less suitable resources from the Digital Coast. So they really stressed the importance that the Digital Coast played in providing that access point to all of that great coastal data, to those coastal tools to make their work more efficient, to the training to really help them to be more efficient in what they do and in examining the coastal zone. So great publication. It's something we're very proud of. Again, we've recently updated it for 2015, and you can find it through the Digital Coast website. So that's all I've got this morning. Again, I really appreciate everyone here in the room and on the webinar. I'll leave you here with the URL to the Digital Coast website, and not too difficult to remember, but I always tell folks you can always Google Digital Coast. It'll come on. You will be able to get to us. I'll also stress that we really we enjoy getting feedback from our users. So if you have something, if you go through the website, if you have a question that you'd like us to answer, we're always available to take your answers and to get feedback. And we really value feedback. It helps us ensure that, again, that we're really ensuring that the Digital Coast is containing actionable information, that folks are using it. And also, too, we employ social media methods. You see we're on Facebook and Twitter, so definitely give us a follow and a like if you're on those as well. So that's all I've got. I think we've got some time this morning for questions, but thank you.
Thanks, Josh. All right, we'll give the WebEx audience a minute or two to write their questions. Anyone in the room have a question that they'd like to start with?
Josh. When you were demonstrating the map of Charleston, you mentioned, I think it was a partnership with the University of South Carolina to get socioeconomic data.
Mm-hmm.
It looks very interesting. Do you have those types of partnerships with other universities in other coastal areas, or does the University of South Carolina cover other coastal communities as well with that type of data?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that partnership was done specifically for that particular data set, which is, it's coming from the University of South Carolina. It is national in scope. Most certainly. And so, that was for us, we felt like it was a great proxy for looking at kind of coastal vulnerability in these areas, again, because they had gone through using data from census and other different areas and really kind of distilled that down into an index we felt was really useful. Our partnership really resulted in what was initially a county level data set being remapped down to the census tract level, but being available nationally. And really, it's a good question with regard to academia. I mean, certainly we have other different partnerships in other areas to achieve some of our Digital Coast goals with academia. We find that they're a fantastic partner to work with through training in other areas as well.
Josh, thank you. Very helpful, very interesting. I've got actually a couple of questions.
Okay.
The first one, I see, as a NOAA attorney, I see the potential benefits for this for a lot of the work that we do.
Great.
And for example, NEPA documents, environmental impact statements, et cetera. I mean, that really could beef up a lot of the information. And so is this something where I should be, pointing my clients to this site, or is this something that, in addition to pointing them to the site, that they might get some technical assistance and support in how to kind of take full advantage of it?
Great question. Thank you. Absolutely. Pointed to the Digital Coast, and we provide access to a variety of different data sets. But again, this is where I think having that two-way street with folks, our users, would really be helpful, because we may find that there are gaps in the information we provide, especially as it relates to the application of looking at, say, NEPA. And things like that, and so we'd want to hear from them. Want to hear from folks and say, hey, what? Again, there's so many different applications that without that kind of two-way street and without that feedback, we do recognize that we would have some gaps. So it would be interesting to know, whether or not we've got the right data, and if not, how we can better facilitate linkages to those organizations and federal, regional, and local entities that have that information. And then, we constantly review kind of our training and technical assistance. We're all, training in technical assistants are both in very high demand, and so we always are trying to look for where we can get the most out of our activities, and to where we can really serve, the largest meet the needs of the most constituents there. And so we don't have training right now on anything like NEPA or something. But again, that's something where if we get great feedback from some of our partners and colleagues, it could be something that we explore in the future. Something we could add as well.
And that gets you to my second question, if I can steal it while I have the mic, is
Sure.
What's on the horizon? I've been working with your office for a decade or so, and one of the old issues that I remember us wrestling with, it's hard to get the data, but it's like, where is it that the state submerged lands end, and where is it that the intercontinental shelf starts? Because from a legal management perspective, these lines are important, but it's often hard to get that data. I think when we started, we thought it was going to be easy, and we realized how difficult it is. Is that still on the horizon to try to get that data?
It is, and obviously, Ola, you're very familiar with our efforts with Bureau of Ocean Energy Management through the Marine Cadastre, where I think if we look to what they've done as a model, recognizing that certainly it's been a challenge to bring all of that great data together for those specific applications, looking at ocean management, but the path that they took was, again, to not only develop these great products and services that you can get to through the Digital Coast, but also build partnerships with these different regional entities, in that case with Ocean Management, and to really figure out how we can get these folks to manage the data themselves, and then we can connect to that. Data management is a very it's challenging as the volume of data grows larger and larger. It becomes more and more challenging, and so I think to your question of where we see things going, it's less of us managing the data, more of enabling regional entities, states, and locals, working with them to have them manage the data themselves, and then we facilitate access to that. But there's lots of great advantages to that. It means that as the data is updated, then you're getting that a lot faster and more efficiently than if it was coming through someone like us. So I see us continuing to work with organizations to have them manage the data, then facilitating access so that it's seamless to the user. I think that's one area for us. I think continuing to work with visualization tools. There's no one tool that's going to help solve coastal management, but we can continue to build tools in certain areas like the marine cadastre that helps with particular specific applications in specific regions. I think you'll see more of that, and then definitely training and technical assistance. Now we've got the web to help us do courses online that expands the reach, and it's very exciting for us. It helps us to do more with less, if you will. So I think you're going to see that as well.
Yeah. Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you.
Thanks. One from the WebEx in a semi-similar vein. Are there any plans to partner with the USGS to work on inland waterways and flooding or socioeconomic vulnerabilities?
Wow, that's a great question. It's one we've gotten in the past. Certainly, I think there's opportunities to work collaboratively to share some of the methods that we employ along the coastal margins, such that we can achieve some sort of standardization there. That's something we hear from our partners and constituents that they'd like to see that. We hear it specifically with our Snapshots product and others that folks would like us to work in these inland areas. And so again, I think we've in certain instances we do build these partnerships and relationships with these organizations, but again to not actively develop something, but to share kind of what works for us and how it works, so that ideally then it results in the USGS or the Army Corps of Engineers or other federal partners we work with kind of taking the same tact, so that to the end user it seems rather seamless, that the information is very similar to them. So it's definitely something that yes, it's on our horizon. It's something we definitely strive for.
Great. Anyone else in the room? All right, we'll do one more WebEx. And this is kind of connected to that last question. Is there a role for standards from different organizations? They asked, such as OGC. Yeah, absolutely. So the OGC is the Open Geospatial Consortium. And it's where we really are seeing a lot of standard development in the world of the geospatial, looking specifically at standard, looking at server-oriented architectures, web services. They have the web mapping service spec, and others. And certainly, I think that helps, because when you have standard ways in which you share data and information, it means that regardless of the technology you're employing, we can be confident that everyone is getting, has access to the information. We know what flavor it's going to be in. We know what information is going to be with it. We know we're going to be able to work with it. And so, absolutely, we through our data registry that we have in the Digital Coast, where we can, we put data out the door through not only Esri web services, but also OGC compliant web services. Because again, we hear from some of our partners and users that they employ technologies that really work well with those, and again, it provides that kind of certainty with what we're doing. So, in the room.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. Can you go a little bit more into the return on investment discussion, how you're quantifying some of the benefits that are coming out?
Certainly. So, what we looked at here was, basically, you see in the top right-hand corner here, we took a look at things like the number of, we quantified the number of data downloads, data service visits, kind of visit tool downloads, tool visits, things like this, map services, pulled it all together. And we worked, again, with this survey, with our partners that really surveyed their membership to find out, okay, how much time are you saving specifically when you're working with some of these Digital Coast resources. So if you're accessing a Digital Coast tool, how much time are you saving? And then basically we connected that to some numbers, basically kind of take a look at then how much money, how much value is that providing then to an organization? If you're downloading a tool from us and you're saving X number of hours, how can we relate that then to dollars saved? And then being able to kind of roll all that up. So it looks at, again, basically, tools, data sets, having that data. So it really is kind of providing access to these resources that make it more efficient, the work more efficient to the different users of the Digital Coast. Rolling all of that up together, comparing it to the cost or what have you, is really how we've done this, and then projecting that into the future. So that's a kind of 36,000 foot view of this, and so I invite you again. There's the benefits and cost document that's on the Digital Coast that goes into much more details to how we really articulated those.
One more in the room.
Sorry, just to follow up. So it does not include actual avoided incidences, any kind of management that would have come out of use of the data.
Correct.
So that number could be much larger.
It could, yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah, it does not look at kind of avoidance at this point. It's something we'd love to, and again, we've already seen where we've kind of revisited this information in the future. If we can get to that, if we can get information on that, where we feel confident data that can get to that, where it helps us articulate, we'd love to add it in here. We just aren't at that point right now.
Going back to the sea level rise viewer, do we have a sort of a timeline on when we'll be able to build more confidence into those confidence maps, or when we'll be able to know more about how things are rising and what the potential impacts are going to be?
Yeah. So with your first question there, as the confidence maps that you saw are based off of the both the underlying data, the accuracy of the underlying data, which is about in low relief areas we get about a half a foot vertical accuracy. Goes to about 1.2 feet in our high relief areas. Essentially, that as well as the methods we employ in doing what we call datum transformations to bring in the tidal datums into that. That in itself then is dependent on both the tool that we employ, VDatum, which is from our colleagues in the National Geodetic Survey, and the transformation parameters there, the distance to the actual tide gauges. So there's some more tide gauges would bring that error down a little bit, as well as better data. And one of the things that we feel confident we've brought together some of the best data we could find at a national level. But we're always working with our federal colleagues, state and local, as they collect new data. We try to add that in as we have resources available to do that. So there's no timeline in kind of making that. It's all again dependent on whether new data exists. And new tide gauges come online, things like that. But to your second point, about kind of the projections, one of the things that I think is important to note about the sea level rise viewer is that it's agnostic of the projections right now. Basically, you come in there and you have the ability as a community to go from 0 to 6 feet above mean high or high water. There are numerous projections that are out there right now at a worldwide level, a national level, but there are also projections that are done and derived regionally, as they should be. And so it makes a challenge for us to be able to develop a tool that's nationally relevant, but then can be applicable at those different with those different regions. We've handled it by keeping this kind of disconnected from that, but we then provide information on how someone can get our data and actually kind of do some of those calculations. There's other different methods that are available through others, and it's something that we're exploring, really putting out and emphasizing even more. It will help us to keep kind of a nationally relevant kind of product out there, but then, again, providing, augmenting that with some resources and technical assistance as necessary, potentially training in the future to allow someone to then take that national data and really kind of, then integrate it with regional projections for sea level rise to really start to look how, at when particularly they could start to see some of this flooding. It's a great question. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room? All right. We have two more from WebEx that I'm going to kind of combine a little bit.
Okay.
Someone asks how the digital coast maps are different than Google Earth maps, and I think they mean apart from the projections, but more like where you're probably sourcing the maps.
Mm-hmm. How the digital coast maps are different from Google Maps? It's a good question. Basically, so the maps that you get through Google are web services. They're base maps. In fact, you may see some of our products actually used to employ some Google base maps. But basically, what's actually kind of nice about this whole idea of web services, and it's again what we've kind of taken advantage of more recently through the Digital Coast, is that you can connect to our data that we provide through those tools, like the Sea Level Rise Viewer and others, and you can bring it in through some of these web-based mapping platforms like ArcGIS Online, and you can actually overlay it through a process we call mashing up with the base maps and the data that you get from Google. And so it allows that kind of flexibility to have someone kind of pick and choose kind of the information they have. But certainly we rely on similar data sets. Google utilizes both aerial imagery and vector-based maps that we also utilize either from Google themselves or from other vendors like Microsoft and Bing Maps, as well as ESRI or Esri and ArcGIS Online.
Great, thanks. And then You touched on this a little bit when you were looking at the tool that showed if the sea levels rose half a meter or a full meter. But someone asked, with relation to how to make predictions based on when certain areas are going to be underwater due to global warming or climate change, or I think they're thinking of more like long term, looking at 5 years, where may the flooding be if things continue the way they are?
It's a great question. I think it goes back to the question that was asked here from the audience. Again, we kind of keep things, that all of that information in the sea level rise viewer, with the exception of what you can do with the marsh migration tool, is again, it's agnostic of particular time frames. You would need to you need to kind of take a look at some of the different projections. So NOAA has some, the Army Corps of Engineers have some as well. And then from that kind of figure out, again, within your own communities, kind of, really
Create
what,
the tool there.
within a certain time frame, what you may expect. And then you can, basically that will give you, presumably a number, an inundation level. That's when you could come back to the viewer and kind of take a look and say, okay, so what would that look like on the ground?
Right.
And then again, the whole idea of this is to provide information for communities to use, but to enable them to make their own decisions to see, what's really in that inundated area. Is it natural areas? Are there vulnerable populations? And that's information that communities then can use to take action.
Great. Any other questions in the room?
Any chance of a digital ocean someday?
I think for us, it's a question I think relates back to how we define coast, and we define coast very broadly. It goes from the adjacent coastal watersheds all the way out to the EEZ. So for us, it includes the ocean. So I think we like to think of it as both coast and ocean as well. So that's, I guess, no plans on the horizon right now. We include it with this. So yes.
Thank you. Great presentation. I live in southern Maryland. We get these notices from the National Weather Service on a regular basis that says you're under a coastal flooding warning.
Mm-hmm.
It would be interesting to be able to see in sort of a real time what is actually happening on that coastal flooding. Is that something that might be in the works, a partnership with the National Weather Service, part of that prediction, and then some real time data on that?
Certainly, that's a great question, and yes, our office is working with the Center for Operational Oceanographic Products and Services right now. In the Chesapeake Bay region, certainly on down to Hampton Roads, we're seeing shallow coastal flooding. These episodic flooding is occurring much more frequently. And we're working. We've got co-ops has this great network of tide gauges and with all this great data that comes from it. And then we've got what we do through the Digital Coast of linking data and information, as well as we're working through what co-ops does with some of their products. We're looking for that great nexus point to figure out, how can we then kind of leverage those data streams that co-ops and our partners with the Integrated Ocean Observing System kind of put out the door, how we can then kind of bring that into a useful product that's that can really appeal more to the coastal management community. So I think you'll see something in the future on that. It's definitely something that we're working on. But I think you've hit it right on the head. That's a real need right now for what folks in these areas, especially in the southeast and mid-Atlantic coast, that are seeing this shallow coastal flooding occurring much more frequently than it used to. Certainly. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else in the room? All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh. It's a great tool. It seems like it's really laying a good foundation for people to take this data and utilize it in a lot of different ways. Mm-hmm. And we appreciate you coming today and talking to us about it. And thanks, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laura. Appreciate it.